base. And that happens because there's bankruptcies, there's canceled orders, there's late orders that can't be accepted, there's rejected orders, there's a factory makes, they meant to make 20,000 of something and they make 21,000 of it. It's all so there's these little dribs and drabs that spill out of the manufacturing and retail supply chain. And they spill out in small quantities of dissimilar goods from highly varied suppliers. And it doesn't work it doesn't work for mainstream retailers to deal in them. So there have to be these people who clean it all up, and they're called jobbers. And they tend to be folks that folks like you and me never meet. They tend to be bada bing, bada boom. I know the guy who knows the guy. I'm working on this truckload of Titleist, and he's got a, you're running on a street corner in Las Vegas. Hey, Louie, what's up? Hey, listen, I got, a truckload of Sunbeam waffle makers, 217 gross, retail $99, wholesale $40. Sell you the whole thing. You do a take. I'll give it all to you for $10 a piece. Offer good for 2 minutes. That's how the world of jobbing runs. And I said, well, let's get a company. I bought a company that was in the flea market industry. And I said, but had these sort of Louis, Tony, Vinny jobbers at the heart of it. I said, let's get this going. We'll have a dozen or so of them. We'll buy these goods. And listen, if you walk down the street in Brooklyn and you see all these signs, discount to you appliances, discount to you electronics, that's what's really going on behind the scene. They're cleaning up the dribs and drabs. So we started that business. And it was October 99, we launched. And we were having trouble getting going, and we were selling $40 a day, then $100 a day, and clicking along. And then this thing happened, this wonderful thing happened called the dot-com collapse. And all these I should mention, I went with that model, I went with that business idea to Sand Hill Road in a day when anyone could go with a one-page business plan, $100 million to start a pet food company. Oh, yeah, well. And I went to 85 venture capitalists, and in the fall of 99, with that idea, which I thought was so obvious, and I was turned down by 85 venture capitalists, and we never got any venture capital money. And so we were clicking along, struggling, just trying to keep our head above water when this glorious thing happened, the dot-com crash. And we discovered that as all these dot-coms went bankrupt, that this supply chain that we had optimized to deal with these kinds of situations worked really well on bankruptcies too. And we went in and started cleaning up bankrupt dot-coms. We ended up cleaning up, buying, and liquidating 19 dot-coms who had been funded by the same VCs who had turned me down for money. I promise I'm much too mature to take any satisfaction from that. I was actually, when around a year or two later, ABC, Chris Cuomo, 2020, came out to do a story when there was a whole Doonesbury series about us called MyVulture.com. If you ever saw the MyVulture.com, it was based on a guy doing just what I was doing. And Chris Cuomo came out from 2020, and they did a story about these kind of funny guys in Utah who were doing this. And he asked me on television, well, how do you feel about making money off the distress of other businessmen? And I said, well, Mr. Buffett always taught me that the first rule of business is, if you're not going to kick a man when he's down, when are you going to kick him? That's how we got going, and that's how we got cash flow positive, and we rocked and rolled, and the rest was history. So that's the background on Overstock, and I applied it to a bunch of, I'm going to show you how I've applied the Austrian approach in some things we've done within Overstock that I think you may find really interesting. And one of them, and for me, this was my Saul on the road to Damascus moment, actually. And I feel this way because Thomas Sowell and I, an economist at Hoover, who's not an Austrian, but I think probably quite sympathetic to, you'd find a lot of his views sympathetic. He said that his great conversion moment was reading Hayek, F.A. Hayek, 1945, American Economic Review, The Use of Knowledge in Society. And I won't read this whole, but it's worth going over. This paragraph, I'll never forget. This was like the scales fell from my eyes. The peculiar, and remember that he's talking about society, but you can apply this to corporation as well. The peculiar character of the problem of a rational economic order is determined by the fact that the knowledge of the circumstances never exists in concentrated or integrated form, but as dispersed bits of incomplete and frequently contradictory knowledge which separate individuals possess. The economic problem of society is thus not merely how to allocate given resources. It is rather a problem of how to secure the best use of resources known to any of the members of society for whose whose relative importance only those individuals know. Or to put it briefly, is a problem of the utilization of knowledge not given to anyone in its totality. Well, you could not describe my job better running this 2,000-person company than that. So 2 very influential books on me by Sowell were Knowledge and Decisions and A Conflict of Visions. I'm just curious, who here has read A Conflict of Visions? I've known a lot of people who describe this book as really that their conversion experience is that book on the right. And 2 themes he develops is knowledge frontier. It's very Hayekian. His view of things is very Hayekian. He was a student of Milton Friedman's, and he's at Stanford now, but he's really a great synthesis in my mind between, I know that the purists among you, how some of you feel about my great friend and teacher Milton Friedman, but Sowell seems to have blended the 2. And he speaks for the knowledge frontier. In any situation, there's the frontier of knowledge, and there's the locus of discretion, which is, who gets to make the decision. And the farther the locus of discretion is separated from the frontier of knowledge, the more information costs you have. And some people just see the world as a place where information is cheap to transfer, and you can process it centrally and issue order back to the front. But if you think of information costs as being high, then you want to always try to keep a locus of discretion shifted as close as possible to the knowledge frontier. And so what really comes down to in people's thinking is how costly do they understand information to be to centralize and process. And if you ever run a large organization, what you find out is it is much more expensive and difficult to keep. It's the nature of bureaucracies. Information does not flow freely. It's costly to centralize and process. So you will always want to be shifting the knowledge frontier. You always want to be shifting the locus of discretion to the knowledge frontier as best you can. That leads to 2 different visions of institutional design in society or in a corporation. What Sowell calls the unconstrained vision, which is if you think that knowledge is cheap to centralize, then in society you're going to be more in favor of central planning, legislative law, and design systems run by experts, run by anointed, who can run things better for us than we can run on our own. That's the Dilbert vision of things. The pointy-haired guy in the corner, or in a corporation, he's got all the information, he's the expert, and he's going to issue it. So he gets the information and he sends out the orders. The constrained vision of society is that knowledge is costly to centralize, and so we want to save on that cost by decentralizing decision-making through markets, through the common law, which represents kind of a combined accumulated wisdom of many trials and errors where the better rules have survived through a Darwinian selection process. By the way, a fantastic example of that I don't think I've seen, maybe papers on this have been delivered a lot here, but a fantastic example of this is the takings clause. And Richard Epstein has written about this. The takings clause goes back to William of Ockham. It's almost 1,000 years old. And it embodies a certain economic wisdom. And it comes down to us in our Constitution. Government shall not take things without just compensation. That's an example of a principle that has survived through Darwinian selection. And Richard Epstein makes a case. It's a beautiful example if you're looking for an example in the common law of a principle that would give hamlets or villages or counties that follow that principle a competitive advantage versus their neighbors and would help them prosper over time. You should look at the Takings Clause and Richard Epstein's work on that. And self-organizing systems. This all follows from the constrained system, so a beehive is sort of a perfect example of that. How I've applied that in our company is there was a book came out 10 years ago called The Wisdom of Crowds. And it was about how there's a certain class of problems in economics that surprisingly crowds do better at solving than individuals. If you put up a jar of jelly beans up here and everybody guesses how many jelly beans are in the jar, very few people's guess is close. But if you take the average of all our guesses, it tends to be better, more accurate than about 95% of the individuals. There's a whole class of problems that have that feature. And for a crowd to be wise, there are 4 constraints. There has to be diversity of opinion and independence. People can't give each other orders. Decentralization of information. Everyone gets the same view of the jelly bean jar. And a way to aggregate their guesses. Well, the jelly bean jar, it's easy. Everyone writes on a slip of paper and so forth. But a whole class of new technologies came out just a book on them came out in 2009 called Enterprise 2.0. E2.0 is a new class of technologies that we adopted in our company. And I spend my time mostly these days in institutional design. It's really funny. There's a woman, a colleague of mine, runs the company. And I spend my time doing sort of thinking philosophically and thinking about institutional design within the company. And where I get to test these theories. And Enterprise 2.0 is a set of technologies that let us harness this wisdom of crowds in our company. And it happens in many ways. But one is everybody has a dashboard when they come in. I have the same dashboard as the customer care agent. The dashboard has all this information, all the tools you use to run all these reports on what's happening, as well as widgets and announcements and widgets about traffic and weather and stuff in Salt Lake, which is where our company is. But and also, so we all share the same dashboard. And then there are a bunch of tools that I'm always pushing questions and decisions out to the crowd. And you would be amazed at how much I'm now able to push out to the company. It's made such a difference in the last 5 years in terms of our ability to innovate. One of them is called idea management. This came out of some work at Stanford. Some sociologists and anthropologists and economists studied how do ideas float up in a good organization. Well, how they float up is, there's idea management, decision management, project management. Idea management in healthy organizations, ideas get proposed. Some of them attract a certain amount of buzz. Of those buzz, some actually get buy-in. And then of the buy-in, the executives or whatever select some of them to do. Well, there were some early commercial steps made towards doing this, and none of the packages out there were very good, is what we found. So we built our own. And we now have a system on this dashboard where it's like a suggestion box, but much more than a suggestion box. People can propose business ideas and plans. Other people come and edit them and adopt them and vote on them, and the system measures how much buzz an idea is getting, and then how much, and people can vote up and down, and they can vote with different degrees and such. And so eventually the better ideas start emerging from the muck, and all that I have to do is myself and about 60 colleagues at the leadership team, we have a continuous stream of these ideas coming out. And it isn't, like I say, it isn't just a suggestion box. It's much more powerful than that. These ideas come out, they're well-formed, very well-developed. People have been collaborating and building them together. And it's made my job so much easier because I